What's the weirdest rule you had in your home growing up? I wasn't allowed to put sugar in my tea because my mom told me that when you go to prison, they don't let you have sugar, so it will make prison that much harder. 1. Thanks for having so much faith in me, Mom. 2. I'm pretty sure you are allowed sugar for your tea in prison. We had silverware with roses on it. Our thumbs had to be on the rose when we used the utensils, or we'd have to practice after dinner. Utensils couldn't make any noise against your teeth, or you'd have to practice after dinner. My house was a real ball of laughs growing up. I wasn't allowed to put any personal touches in my room. No posters, paint colors, pictures of my friends, or any sort of choices. Not even my comforter. It was all decorated to my mother's specifications. My dad made up a rule to stop my big brother from asking about getting a dog every 10 seconds. We had neighbors on both sides who had dogs, so the rule was that only every other house could have a dog. My brother believed it for a long time. I couldn't recline or lay my body down at all if my boyfriend was over. My mom thought that me laying down would give them thoughts, so I couldn't do it. Once, I put my feet up on the couch while my fiancé was over, and my mom got pissed and thought I was trying to turn him on. I also changed into sweatpants from jeans once because I was going to watch a movie with my boyfriend, and she thought that I changed to give him better access. I was just uncomfortable in jeans. Also, no Sailor Moon, Avatar, Fairly Odd Parents, Harry Potter, anything with magic or witchcraft. Also, never celebrated Halloween and never trick-or-treated. No video game consoles ever. I've only owned one video game console in my entire life. It was a Nintendo DS, might have been a 2DS, I don't remember. My mom purchased it because my therapist thought it would be a good idea to have something I cared about that she could take away as a consequence. Yes, you heard that right. The only video game console I ever owned was purchased with the purpose of being taken away. We slowly got more and more into video games, mostly Minecraft after a family friend got it for us, but we never ever played them on anything other than a PC. My dad was a complete psycho, and we had silent dinners every night when he got home from work. No one was allowed to speak at the dinner table while we were eating. Period. If me or my brothers were caught whispering, talking, making any noise, we were fucked. Our punishment was to finish our dinner standing up in the neutral zone, which was a 3-foot by 3-foot square made of painter's tape on the floor of the kitchen in the other room. We weren't allowed to use our hands to eat anything while we were standing up holding out plates, so eating any food that required a fork and knife was a pain in the ass. If we got caught and went to the neutral zone, we weren't allowed to have dessert or watch any TV until it was time to go to bed. I wasn't allowed to go near the kitchen. In my country, it's common for middle-class families to have maids doing house chores, and my parents said I shouldn't bother the maids doing the job. Also, kitchen is full of dangerous things. So I grew up not knowing how to cook anything. Every time I go near the kitchen, my mother would kind of mean laugh at me, saying I can't cook so I shouldn't bother messing the kitchen. She can't cook herself, having had maids her whole life, so that might be insecurity projection or something, I don't know. Or maybe she thought if she can't cook and her daughter can, it'll expose her as a bad mother or something. The woman has a lot of that kind of insecurity. There's a lot to unpack there. Once I moved out, one of the first things I do was start teaching myself how to cook. I love cooking now. Sorry for bad English. We couldn't eat ice cream 2 days in a row. My dad's reasoning for it makes sense. There may be a risk of heart disease in the family, so limiting ice cream means limiting intake of saturated fat. However, the executing of the rule is questionable. Why 2 days? Why be so rigid and inflexible? Does having this rule mean the kids look forward to their ice cream days overall increasing intake? I'm the youngest and we're all adults now. The rule came up in discussion and my brother came up with a hypothetical. What if I eat it 2 days in a row, but then I don't eat it again for the next 3 days? And my dad admitted that it would have been a reasonable exception, but he would not have allowed it back then. I still follow the rule. It's not like I eat ice cream every other day like clockwork, it's a rare treat. I just still avoid 2 days in a row. But sometimes I make my brother's exception. Another anecdote. My sophomore year of college, a frozen yogurt station was installed in the dining hall. I texted my dad to ask if the rule applies to frozen yogurt. It does. My mom's shitty boyfriend moved us into his mobile home, and suddenly I wasn't allowed to have a bed. Oh, it might break through the floor! Or a swing set or any of my toys. I was not allowed to watch TV if the boyfriend was home. I wound up begging my mom to buy me some horse magazine and coloring books, and made my own paper doll style toys. Ponies and Lion King for days. The boyfriend also offered to buy me a horse if I behaved. So of course I was a model child, but mysteriously, that horse never appeared. I was so much better off when they broke up and Mom found a 2-bedroom apartment. I got a real bed and a kitten. Mom told me recently that he died and was shocked when I gave 0 fucks and made a callous statement about it. Parents divorced, Dad's house, we were told to shower when we visited, and put our mom's house clothing in a box under the bed after it was cleaned because Mom's house was infected. It's called the Mom's House box. Later found out my stepmom was paranoid because my dad cheated on my mom, and she thought my mom would take revenge somehow. It got crazier than that. My stepmom made us write in journals, told us to write whatever we wanted, so we did. After 3 years, she read it out loud at the dinner table and then punished us for what we wrote. Later, she locked me in my room, called the cops, said I was lying, trying to murder her, got told to be appreciative of my rich family by a cop. Once I went to school, I told them what happened, and stepmom got told she wasn't allowed to be on school property anymore. Dad and her had to move to a different area. My dad had, and still has, a rule where no one was allowed to drink soda pops. Ever. For any reason. Every time I had friends over, the first thing he asked them was when the last time they had a soda pop. And then he'd force them to burp it all out. And even then, sometimes told them they had to go home. Apparently, carbonation is an affront to all things good and pure about drinking. I don't drink soda pops because I just want to avoid a lecture from the guy. He asks all the time too, every time I see him, "You drink a soda pop?" And I gotta say no or he'll be pissed off at me for like a month. He told my wife he wouldn't attend the wedding if there was going to be soda pops, and then told her again he wouldn't touch our baby if she drank any soda pop at all while she was pregnant. Honestly, I drank a soda pop in college and I kinda see where he's coming from. Drinks shouldn't be crunchy. His vehement hate seems like a little much though. He can't even go to a restaurant because they have soda pops on the menu. Last time we went out to eat, he yelled at the server for even offering and then stormed out. But not before knocking over the soda pops of some family the table over. I wonder if he's ever even tried a soda pop. I'm sure he'd rather die than try. My parents are awesome, but I have some weird cousins. When I was younger, my parents went on a short anniversary trip, leaving me and siblings with my older cousin to watch us. She is the same age as my parents. I remember one morning turning on Magic School Bus, and she frantically grabs the remote from me and turns it off. She then proceeds to go on a lecture on how witchcraft is a sin and made by Satan himself, and that Magic School Bus is one of those sinful abominations. I couldn't fucking believe it. Turns out, her kid wasn't allowed to watch any of that. Harry Potter, Magic School Bus, Wizards of Waverly Place, some of the many things that apparently are just a gateway to joining a satanic cult. Her sister held the same beliefs. Jeez and Gosh were banned because they sounded kinda like Jesus and God, so it was considered subtly taking the Lord's name in vain. Wasn't allowed to say shut up because it was a bad word as well. And then one day my mom told me to shut up. We weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween because it was the devil's holiday. We weren't even allowed to go to school that day in order to avoid the festivities. They told us the Halloween candy was cursed, so we wouldn't eat it. In the night, we turned off the lights and hid in terror. It was unsafe to go outside in case a Satanist kidnapped us to sacrifice to the devil. Also, Pokemon was considered demonic. Felt bad for watching it, but couldn't resist. My father woke up at anywhere between 10 and 12 every day. Immediately upon waking, he would stumble to the bathroom where he would spend 45 to 75 minutes coughing mucus out of his lungs and spitting it into the sink. He had advanced emphysema because of his decades-long smoking habit. During this time, no one was allowed to talk to him, look at him, interact with him in any way beyond bringing him his shitty instant coffee. I learned this lesson the hard way the first week after my mother married him. Because I had to pee, so I opened the door and was immediately confronted with a 38-year-old, 400-pound man in nothing but his underwear, red-faced, and screaming at me to get the fuck out of the bathroom. That if someone knocked on the door, we were not allowed to move or speak until Mom decided that, yes, we were home and would accept company. Didn't realize how weird that was until my friend came over and seemed surprised when someone knocked on the door, and I covered her mouth and pulled her away from the curtains. My mom refuses to answer the door for unannounced visitors, and to this day, will still pretend no one is home if she doesn't feel like socializing. It's even worse when they call her cell phone and hear it ringing from within the home despite every television being on mute and every light in the house being turned off. To answer some questions, my mother has severe bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, so that had a lot to do with this. Also, I never knew so many people did this. Maybe my friend was the weird one. Wasn't me, but my neighbor. When my dad would come home from work, my friend would have to go home. His parents told him that because that meant it was dinner time and therefore he should return home. Him being a child didn't grasp that portion of the rule. He only understood to come home when my dad gets home. This translated in my friend being terrified of my father. If he saw my dad turning into the driveway, he would drop whatever we were doing and sprint home. If my dad would make it home and get out of the car, he would cry and run home. Somehow, in his head, my father was bad. It took some time before my friend was comfortable around my father. No TV. This was the 80s. We finally got a terrible, tiny black and white TV when I was maybe 12-ish. The only thing I could watch without ruthless mocking was the original Star Trek. If there happened to be reruns, I can still recite them by heart to this day. I was so pop culture illiterate, it was unreal. I had no idea what Saturday Night Live was, or MTV, or anything. In retrospect, I think my dad just hated everything, and especially loud noises. I did learn to love reading, though. Oh, and also dinner was between 10 p.m. to midnight. I was a night owl also from babyhood, so this wasn't the worst thing for me, but I do remember being woken up to come eat many times. My father just preferred it that way, so that's how it was. Every last Friday of the month, my mom would make us stay home from school and play video games as a family. Didn't matter what was happening at school, test or whatnot, it was a rule and a tradition. She'd watch us play Sega or Nintendo games and make us these extravagant lunches. As a kid, I always thought it was awesome, and I look back on those days fondly. Unfortunately, it was for a darker reason. My dad was overly strict and pretty abusive. Although I love the man unconditionally, he was also abusive to my mom and very controlling. Thing was, he had a good job and was off on the weekends, and us kids obviously were at school all week. My mom made the rule so that she could spend a day with us, having fun and being together without my dad there instigating a massive fight or beating us kids because there were vacuum lines on the carpet. It was the only real time my mom got to spend alone without my dad there, aside from summer vacations. I didn't realize it at the time, but to this day, I don't think we missed a single last Friday. She would have never allowed it. We all had to meticulously record in a ledger every penny spent on our family cars. Gas, oil changes, which we did ourselves, alignments, etc. Each ledger was kept in the glove box. Each entry had to include the date, the mileage, price per gallon of gas, or price per quart, oil, or some other description of what was being purchased, total cost, and a few other things I'm sure I've forgotten. This was super embarrassing if I had to get gas with high school or college friends in my car. I was teased about it. However, I always assumed my dad had some impressive spreadsheet which he was tracking something. Years later, after I bought my own car, I asked my dad what he did with all of that data. He said, not much really. Occasionally I'd look to see what kind of gas mileage the cars were getting. Ugh. When I lived with my mom, my stepfather was the man of the house, meaning that he made up every rule and even made on-the-spot rules to counter my ADHD and Asperger's. Dinner rules were a pain in my ass. There was one rule where I could only get up with my plate if I was standing first. Another horrendous rule was I couldn't mix culture food groups, even though every other night we would mix Cholula with ramen. Lifestyle rules, I couldn't play video games after 8 p.m. This is where all my free time was, and it was ruined since I still despise commercial broadcasting. Another rule that was in place by my grandma, a very power-hungry witch with the sole intention of disproving my Asperger's, was that I could only play 1 hour of video games after she went through my phone and found a text of my friend calling me a cunt a whole day after a conversation about my grandma. It still saddens me that my mom stuck with him for as long as she did. In the last 6 months of me living with my mom, he turned into an alcoholic, constantly drinking whiskey, liquor, and beer into one. My mother's divorce with him turned her into an alcoholic too. She thought that it was her fault that he cheated on her. I am late to this, but I am the only girl in my entire generation. I have no girl cousins and 3 brothers. I was not allowed to do anything with my dad and brothers. I wasn't allowed on vacation, I wasn't allowed to go to the store. My mom was welcome on vacation, but I was not. During the summer months, I was sent to live with relatives and my family would travel without me. My dad would constantly remind me of how he never wanted a girl. I remember when I was 9 or 10, I wanted more than anything to be a boy, to be accepted. I am good now, I have issues, I know it, and it's okay. I also love being female, and I know this is not an acceptable way to be treated. I don't talk to any of my family except my mom, and I have a great life. I would say my biggest issue is seeing a dad be a good and real dad to his little girl. I tear up instantly. I am so thankful to that man for just being a good dad. Girls need love from their dad. A few. Was not allowed to eat between meals. My sister and I were not allowed to take naps. Parents could, though. Also, no breakfast foods for lunch or dinner unless it was a night my mom made pancakes for dinner, which I couldn't eat. I was made to and then would not be able to leave the bathroom the whole night. Trust me, when I got to college, I loved eating cereal at 10 p.m. I used to sneak in the pantry and eat in the dark, but you can't sneak a bowl of cereal. My kids will definitely not have these rules. Forbidden to make any noise whatsoever or show any emotion. If we asked to listen to a different radio station in the car, threat of violence. If we asked to roll down a window while 2 adults chain smoked in the car, threat of violence. If we voiced an opinion about what to watch on the family's one TV set, threat of violence. Opinion on what's for supper? Threat of violence. I learned to never speak or give any opinions ever. The only way to avoid being screamed at and struck was to behave as if I didn't exist. Adult life has been rather unsuccessful as a result. Sorry. Guess I needed to get that off my chest. It wasn't all bad. There were 2 exceptions to the above. Christmas and birthday. The parents must have known that they couldn't totally oppress their children on those days. What my parents got for making it clear they didn't want a son was to lose the son. I was about 22 when I realized I didn't have to spend any time with them. It has been a long time since they've heard from me. I found out my mom died by doing a routine Google search and finding her obituary. My reaction? Wait for it. No reaction, as taught. I wasn't allowed to watch TV or play video games with sounds at all. Later, it became I had to have headphones on, but with one ear out and quiet enough that anyone sitting right by me wasn't able to hear even the loudest sound effect. This rule came with a fun reason/rule if spoken to. I wasn't allowed to even take a second to think what was said. I had to instantly reply or being in trouble if called. I instantly had to come do exactly what was asked that second, or I'm in trouble. So now I listen to everything with headphones and sound so quiet you could probably barely hear it. I have a bad habit of listening in on every conversation in the house with my fiance because I subconscious fear of if I miss my name being called or someone asks me something, I'll be screamed at or my things will be taken from me for a week. I don't do well with the movie theater or any loud shows or games. People who praise games for good soundtracks always make me wish I listened to it, but I usually turn all volume off or so low it's basically off. Oh, and another fun rule, I couldn't have friends over more than once a week on the day my mother chose, and if they can't come over that day, it was not at all. I could only go to friends' houses once a week for an hour before dinner, even if they live far away from our house. Max, an hour. Dad has a slight childhood trauma. He, as a teenager, was once put in a hospital when his broken arm was being fixed. This guy next to him was eating grapes, the dark ones with seeds, and he would take the seeds and place them in a row on the bedside table in between his and Dad's beds. This grossed Dad the fuck out, and he asked the guy many times to stop doing it and to just throw them into the garbage. But dude was being a dick about it. At one point, Dad got mad and punched that guy in his back once. Turns out, that guy was actually there to fix a broken spine, and Dad caused him massive pain. 25 years later, he still can't stop feeling guilty for it. What it translates into, you ask? Grapes being banned as fuck in our family. Growing up, my brother and I were banned from playing Magic the Gathering. We did it anyway, so when we finally got caught, my mom allowed us to play, but we were not allowed to have any of the black cards because they were evil. Also, somehow she could feel evil in Pokemon cards as well, so those were also banned. We eventually just kept cards at friends' houses. I also got a super awkward talk once that if I ever was caught doing drugs, they would call the police on me. But knock a girl up and I was fine and they would support me. So a little bit of harmless weed was jail, unprotected sex was all good.